Alright, hey everyone. Welcome to the 6.2 video comparing and ordering integers. I apologize in advance if you hear some noise in the background. The after school care kids are next door. But anyway, let's get going. Alright, so real quick, let's just review. What's an integer? Integer is a positive or negative non-decimal number. Okay, so that's really important. So 7 is an integer. -5 is an integer. But even something like 12/6 is an integer. Why? Because we know 12/6 simplifies to 2. So just integers, positive or negative non-decimals. Alright, let's recap the signs that you may have seen in the past. I'm sure you have. We got 2 of them. What is this and what is this? That one on the left is greater than, then less than on the other way. The way you can think of less than is it forms kind of an L. You know, if you were to kind of tip him sideways a little bit, kind of make an L. And then if you add underlines, it becomes greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to. And we won't deal with the equal to parts too much right now, but that is coming down the road. Alright, so using our greater than and less than inequality symbols, I want you to pause the video and I want you to try these 5. Play the video when you're done. Okay, so hopefully you've had some time and you got that one, that one. This next one's a little interesting. Which one's greater? Well, even though they're both negative, -5 is closer to 0, and when we're talking about negative numbers, which one is greater than the other? Closest to 0 is what matters. And then over here, what are we going to use? Well, I think we're going to face that way because 13 is greater than -15, okay? Because this is not a 15, it's a -15. It's far down on the left of the number line, left of 0, and then of course, -2.34 is less than 9.001, or we could read this the other way and say 9.001 is greater than -2.34. So when we say that this is less than, and this is a greater than symbol, what we're assuming is that we're reading these things from left to right. 13 is greater than -15, but if I was reading it right to left, it would be -15 is less than 13, right? And you might be saying, well, that's not a less than symbol. It's not. It's the greater than. Okay, this one is the less than. But if I'm reading it from right to left, everything gets flipped. So another way of thinking about it is it always eats the bigger number, right? But it always points towards the smaller number. Okay, eats the bigger one, points toward the smaller one. So if you go up here, it's pointing to the 4, it's trying to eat the 7. Alright, so let's order some integers on a number line from least to greatest, and then we're going to order them without the number line. So starting with the number line is easiest, I think, because it helps us get to the next step quite quickly. So if I'm going to draw these on a number line or graph them on a number line, I don't actually need to do it in order. So let's just start with 5. Okay, 5 is there, -3 is there, 7.5, going to be right between 7 and 8, -1, and then +1. Now, why do we do that part first before ordering them? Because once they're on the number line, look, I'm just going to rewrite them in order, and the number line gives me that order very quickly. Alright, so the freezing temperature of a typical automotive antifreeze, which is what you put into your engine, and it is basically the fluid that cools your engine down as it's cycled through the radiator and pumped back through the engine. It draws heat off of the parts of the engine that are generating heat, so your engine doesn't overheat. And of course, if your engine is going to run when the temperature outside is below freezing, you got to have antifreeze. You can't just use plain water to draw the heat away. You have to pump it full of antifreeze. Why? Well, antifreeze. It doesn't freeze. Or so the name implies. But it actually does freeze. But it freezes at a temperature that's really, really low, and your car is probably not going to be out on that. And if it is, you have a special type of antifreeze. Or you have something in your engine that warms the antifreeze off of battery power so that it never has the chance to get so low in temperature. Anyway, this is generally what it looks like. Dogs think it's very, very sweet, and so you don't want to leave any antifreeze spills out on your driveway if you ever spill some while replacing your antifreeze fluid, because the dog is probably going to try and lick that up, and that's bad. So anyway, the freezing temperature of typical automotive antifreeze is -36 degrees Fahrenheit, and I didn't have a degree symbol on my keyboard, so I'll write it in there. Liquid nitrogen freezes at -346 degrees Fahrenheit. So which one's colder? Well, 346. That's quite a bit, right? But again, we're talking in terms of a number line here. Okay. Negative 30, if this is 0, and this is not going to be to scale, negative 36 would be right about there, okay? But negative 346, that's going to be like way down there, okay? And when we're comparing two negative numbers, well, the one that's furthest left is the smallest, and the one that's to the right is the greatest, right? And even with positive numbers, the one to the right, furthest right, is the greatest. So which one's colder? Negative 346. So liquid nitrogen has a lower freezing temperature. Another thing we need to be aware of is what's called sea level, okay? Sea level is used in reckoning or understanding the heights of geographical features, such as mountains. So we say, well, that mountain is 4,207 feet above sea level, okay? And really what that means is if here's the sea and there's a mountain over here, it's the height from the top of the mountain to the ocean near it. Now, sea level is said to have an elevation of 0. That's another thing. So if we're going to talk about what's the elevation of the mountain, if it's 4,000 feet tall, that means we started down here at 0 feet. So sea level is 0. Now, we also talk about cities and towns in terms of sea level a lot as well, like that city is only 1 foot above sea level. Or in this next example, we'll talk about New Orleans, which is below sea level. All right, so the lowest point in the state of Louisiana is in actually New Orleans. And so you guys remember Hurricane Katrina, you probably maybe remember it vaguely, caused a lot of damage. And the reason it could do that is not only because it's a hurricane, it's because the levees are man-made structures that keep water out, they burst. And because New Orleans is below sea level, the water just came rushing in. It's not like the water had to go uphill to get to New Orleans. The levees actually keep the water out of New Orleans all the time until they broke, and then they let it all in. So the lowest point in the state of Louisiana is New Orleans, and that's 8 feet below sea level, right? So again, if this is sea level and this is the Atlantic Ocean outside of New Orleans, that's 0. Here's the city of New Orleans, right? And that's at negative 8 feet, or 8 feet below sea level is another way of saying that. Okay, now the highest point in Louisiana, though, is Driscoll Mountain, which is 535 feet above sea level. So let's answer a couple questions. What integer represents New Orleans' position relative to sea level? Well, actually, accidentally already just gave you the answer. It's negative 8 feet, okay, relative to sea level. Okay, now why is it negative 8? Because we're starting at 0 and we're saying New Orleans is 8 foot below, it's negative. Okay, if it was 8 feet above sea level, it would have been positive, but it's not. What integer represents the Driscoll Mountain? Okay, its position relative to sea level. Well, up here it says 535 feet above. Okay, so it's a positive number. It's above sea level. It's 535 feet. And then if you were to drive from the Driscoll Mountain to New Orleans, what integer would represent your change in elevation? Okay, so you are going from the Driscoll, which Driscoll Mountain is right there, so obviously not very tall, only 535 feet. Driving from there down to New Orleans, which is beautiful. You should visit if you never have. Okay, what's your change in elevation? That's an interesting question. Change in elevation. So I'm starting in the mountain, going to go down the mountain, along the road, and then I'm going to New Orleans. And again, if this is sea level right here, and the bottom of the mountain is sea level, New Orleans is below sea level. And again, we said it's at negative 8 feet below sea level. And the Driscoll is 535. Well, think about it. What if you were going to drive from the top of the Driscoll Mountain down to sea level, to the bottom? Well, it'd be 535 feet, right? Yes, that's how much distance you travel. But we're looking at the integer that represents your change in elevation. And because you dropped in elevation, you actually traveled negative 535 feet. But once you get close to New Orleans, you go down an additional 8 feet, right? Okay, you got to go down another because it's negative 8 feet below sea level. So we have to add in another negative 8. So what we do is we just kind of combine the two real quick and say we went down 535, then we went down 8 even further. And so 535 and 8, if you were to combine them, you'd have 543. but the change in elevation, because the whole time we were dropping, is negative 543 feet. All right, guys, that is all I got for you. Thanks for sticking with it, and I will see you in class.